Hey everyone, Willow here. This week on Starting Out Solitary, we are on week 168 and the topic is witchy reference books. Now before I sat down to do this video, I went through my collection of books and dare I say it, I have so many books. I have these shelves here and then over there I have a much bigger bookshelf with about 6 shelves that has books on it as well. And during that process I found that I was taking out most of my books. And when I stopped for a moment and had a look around, I realized that none of those books are books that I really refer to much today. I will share with you what witchy reference books I do refer to quite a bit, and I guess in time they're the ones that I really go to most of the time. But during that process, as I was taking out the books, I discovered that it was depending on where I was on my path and where I was wanting to gain more knowledge and learn on and get a better understanding of. So at the beginning, there was a collection of books that I read quite a bit on Wicca, witchcraft, shamanism, Buddhism, paganism. And from that, for example, I wanted to get a better feel for deities and gods and goddesses, because coming from the Christian Orthodox belief, I couldn't quite get my head around there being a goddess or multiple deities for that matter. So I have a collection of books on Celtic pantheon, Egyptian, Greek, Buddhism, all that kind of stuff. And in amongst all of that, I felt a pull to learn something, in another area. For example, herbalism and magical correspondences of herbs and crystals and the list goes on basically. Some of the books that I do refer to aren't even written by witchy authors, but some of them are. Certain parts resonate with me strongly, some not so strongly, and some not at all. And those books I've kind of got rid of. Either I've sold them or I have donated them. But it showed to me that it was a reflection on where I was or where I am on my path. When I first began, back then, a lot of people recommended starting with Scott Cunningham's books, and I remember going to Book Depository in Fish Pond. That's a website on the internet, and they have free postage worldwide, so you can get them at a fairly decent price as well. And so I started reading Scott's books, and I found them easy to understand. Some parts resonate with me, some parts didn't, but that's all okay. I really enjoyed his books because as they were easy to understand, also every now and then he would mention that it was just the way he did things and it didn't necessarily mean that it was going to work for everyone, and to try and give it a go and kind of take it from there. So I feel grateful that I did start with his books because I was open to that from the outset. So I wasn't kind of stuck in the you have to do it this way and it needs to be done that way. I remember for about the first year, I spent a lot of time just reading. And at that time, I didn't feel ready to start practicing, which looking back in hindsight, I should have done that, from the outset. However, that was my way of learning, growing and expanding. But what helped me the most at the end of the day is creating my own reference books, because I could pick and choose, from books, photocopy certain sections, or I would late at night sit with the laptop on my lap and, ask Google questions and see what answers Google would come up with and kind of fall down that Google rabbit hole. It was here that I discovered witchy people creating videos and having YouTube channels as well, and I love that idea because a lot of people were sharing their personal experiences, and again it just opened everything up for me even more so, and they would recommend reading material or doing certain things. So I found at one stage that I was getting kind of overwhelmed with all of this information, yet not personally practicing, which made it difficult. As I said, in hindsight, when I look back, I probably should have began practicing myself. But anyhow, that's, we all learn differently. And so I created my own witchy reference books. I would find a link, a website, and I would email that to my personal email address. And then at work, I would print off whatever it was that I wanted to add in my resource folder, and then make my own personal notes to that. I have in total 6 of these folders that I don't refer to as much. because I feel it was more at the beginning of the stage, and I kind of have progressed along the way, and there are new things that I'm learning. So I've created, you know, other journals, and I kind of veer off in a certain direction, stop, and then I veer off in another direction. But creating my own witchy reference folders was a great place for me to start. I have 6 of these, as I've said, and I've just taken out 3 of them to share with you. This one is on workshops or courses that I've done on the internet that are, you know, witchy related. So I print off all of them, and I label them in certain sections, so I'll mix and jig everything up. And then I have my own personal notes in there, and I put also little post-it notes for parts that I would visit quite frequently. So in here it's got about 3 of the courses. There's another folder with more courses that I have. So I'll print off everything, as I said, and make my own personal notes and use that quite a bit. And I found in doing that, it was all information that related to me, that I wanted to really experience for myself. So it was a great place to start. This one I created when I first began on my path. It's Wicca information. That was kind of when I was veered off to the Wicca path. And so, for example, here, this is from Stacey DeMarco's website. It was a template. I don't know if she still got it. I'm pretty sure she does. A Book of Shadows template, because at that time I had no idea where to even begin writing my own spells. So I printed off a whole bunch at that time, and I've kept them in here too to help me through that process. And then in here, I don't know if she still has a newsletter. It used to be released, I think, once a month. But, you know, certain parts of those newsletters really spoke to me. So I printed those off as well. And I've made my own, you know, little personal notes in here. Plastic pockets full of information. You know, all stuff that really sat well with me, as I said. And I can just easy find it and refer to it. I don't know if I mentioned this, I would photocopy certain sections as well in books that I wanted to put in here. This is another one that I've labeled candle making. This is when I very first started to make candles. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I make my own candles. Generally they are soy candles. Sometimes I make beeswax candles, but in here I've got recipes for you know, certain times of the years, or certain time of the year, sorry, or Sabbats, or candles that I have created for a certain deity or a magical spell. So in here I've written all notes on fragrances and how they made me feel, colors that go with that candle. It's got all of my notes in here. So that's another creative reference folder, and that one I visit quite a bit too, and I add in there as well. Then I've got my oracle card reading journals. This is one of them. This one dates back to 2012. I've written down the deck that I used, what questions I asked, the spread that I used, what the cards meant to me personally, what message I was feeling from the cards, and then I would quickly write down, you know, certain keywords that were in the, you know, in the book that comes with the oracle deck, and then write down my results, etc. So that's something that I refer to every now and then. What else? I have meditation journals, you know, writing down my meditations in here as well. This one dates 2013. I have so many different journals. This is going to look like I have no order, but for me, I have, you know, some sort of an order. And with the reference folders, I found it really good because I didn't have to spend time writing. I could just print it and it was all written for me. So yeah, in here, I refer to this every now and then even. Sometimes I will get a similar message that I know I did way back when, and I can refer to it and see what additional information I get from it. So basically, in a nutshell, pretty much all of my own personal journals and folders and books of shadows, what have you, are the ones that I frequently visit a lot, time and time and time again. I've created so many different folders and books. This is about late 2011. So this is one of my first, you can say, book of shadows to a degree now, but in here I've got different crystals that I began, you know, working with. And at that time I wanted to remember the crystal, so I would write the name of the crystal, what it looked like, so I can remember what the meaning in a lot of the books or internet websites would say it's good to use that particular crystal for. But then also here I've written down personally how I felt, you know, using the crystals. So that, lordy, I've got here, for example, when I had a headache, what crystals I tried out, you know, holding in my left hand, what I felt holding it in my right hand, all of the results when I had a cold in here. I've also, wow, when I worked with Goddess Bridget, you know, back in late 2011, I've got a candle here that I made for her, how I consecrated that candle, what fragrances I used for her in honor of her, colors, and what have you. So this still happens with me. I remember back in the day, I would make a lot of notes or find a lot of pamphlets, and I'd be out and about, and I would think of a spell that I would do in that moment, and I would make quick notes of how I was feeling, what inspired me for the idea, what I did, and then I would write results in the hopes that I would properly write it out, but I never did. Still, I'm glad that I put it in the pockets, because this book has some pockets in here. So information that I've collected wherever I am. Also, I have my garden journal in here, what plants I grow, what survived, what didn't survive, the process in how I would, what's the word that I'm looking for? That I would harvest a particular herb or a plant, what the uses are, that kind of stuff. So that's in this one. Then I have diaries. I've purchased really cheap diaries, and they are my gardening diaries. And in them, I have taken note of, you know, the change in the seasons, where the sun sets and rises during autumn, winter, spring, and summer, because I found through that process that certain patches in my garden has no sun during the winter, and that's why some of the plants wouldn't survive. So I've made notes in perhaps different areas where I can put them, seeds that I planted that didn't work out, notes as to perhaps why that may be the case, ones that were successful. And these were ideas taken at a workshop that I attended probably about 4 years ago, and it's at the Dandenongs, and it was by Miranda from Go To Ground. So I took a lot of good ideas from her in that workshop too. So I have some diaries that is just for my gardening and my green witchery notes and stuff that I've learned. What else? Here's a dream one. See, this is another thing that I refer to quite a bit. My dream journals. I would sit up and in the morning when I wake up, I quickly jot down what my dream was to help me remember that, and it's something that I visit quite often. Here I have my nature reading journals. I did a course a couple of years ago perhaps with Laura Bowen. I have shared this on a video in my personal channel, but I remember before this I was writing my own notes and having that personal connection with nature. But you know, I found her course very beneficial because she gave me some ideas on how to connect with my environment around me, how to go about seeking that information. Then I've got notes on those places that I visited and what I did at that time, whether it be some spells or something that I would do in honor of the ancestors before me on this land as well. She also made some really good suggestive note, kind of similar to what I was doing before that, but I like the idea in that she encouraged us to draw what we would see or what we would notice in nature, and then write a description of what it was doing at that time, and then using that to reflect on you know, within how I was feeling as well as what is going on around me, and seeing the personal connection as well, because I feel definitely that everyone has a personal connection in some way with nature, and that yeah, some people can share with me, for example, oh, you saw this, it means this, but for me it could mean something different, or there may be a reason that that person shared that little something with me as well. So I've got notes in here. This is my nature reading notes. So I have so many journals and stuff, and I refer to them. It depends on whatever it is that I'm doing at that time, what I'm more drawn to, that I would refer to them and add to them as well. But I feel personally that they're the witchy reference books that I do refer to time and time again, more so than books. I mean, I've got a whole huge collection which I have been meaning to kind of go through and sort out, and really I think it's time for some of them for me to let go and, you know, give them to a new home where they'll be more appreciated. But certain parts in books really resonated with me, whereas some didn't quite so much, and yeah, some didn't at all. And really, I guess when someone recommends a book, it's more personal to them in, you know, how they understand when they read it. Some things I found a little bit difficult to understand for me personally, so I wasn't quite ready. Those books I kind of kept so that I can, you know, find some time to reread through them. Christopher Penczak, actually, oh my goodness, I forgot to mention Christopher Penczak. He's another author that I found easy to understand too at the beginning. And while I'm here, this book was actually, before I even discovered that before I even realized I was, you know, a witch, Radiant Healing. It's got a bit of everything in here, auras and crystals and even healthy eating. You know, this is fantastic. If you can ever get your hands on this book, I highly recommend it. This is definitely a keeper for me. But yeah, what else was there? Oh, and I wanted to just quickly share, because there are a lot of YouTubers out there that are from the Northern Hemisphere and therefore recommend books, you know, that are tailored to the Northern Hemisphere. Now, so much for me, it's not much of a bother, but I remember when I first started, I would make notes of the dates that were, you know, mentioned according to the Northern Hemisphere, and I would change it to the Southern Hemisphere. But a breath of fresh air was when I found Fiona Horn, and I discovered a couple of her books in an op shop. So she was a pleasure and delight to read her books as well. They were easy to understand and go with the flow, and she also encouraged that it was her way of doing things, and it didn't necessarily mean that it was for you, but give it a go. Stacey DeMarco was another one too at that time, and she's here in Australia. I'll share a little bit of Stacey's book. I started with reading Witch in the Boardroom, and it was this book that for some reason, and that's why I've kept it, because it has that extra special sentimental value, but I remember hubby and I were going to Queensland holidaying, and I took that book to read with me, and it was here through her book that I would read parts of her book and share it with him, because at this time I hadn't really come out of the closet, of the broom closet, so I was a little bit you know, weary about telling him, and I didn't quite know how to, and so I shared parts of her book, and then he would say, oh, that sounds a bit interesting, let me have a read of that, and it kind of opened, you know, the whole thing of me coming out at that time. So that's here, Witch in the Boardroom. Lucy Cavendish is another Australian author as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But definitely I recommend creating your own reference books and referring to your journals and stuff, because I think, you know, that's where it is your own path. You're creating it, personal experiences, you're recording everything, and you know, you can add to that, take away to that, or whatever. There is something to be learnt. I think it's highly beneficial. Sending you so much love. Until my next video. Bye.